Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game. So, they're gonna fun and exciting video for you guys today because we're gonna be talking about PlayStation 1 emulation. We're not gonna be talking about it in the Duckstation sense or any of the other PlayStation 1 emulators out there. We're gonna be talking about the fact that a developer and YouTube channel going by the name VRified is actually working on PlayStation 1 VR emulation. Concept being that you can actually put on a VR headset, run emulation, and then be in the PlayStation 1 in virtual reality. It would definitely be a vibe, and you know I love vibes on this channel, so we're gonna be talking about it today. And even though I don't really talk about it much on the channel as far as the hardware is concerned or review any of the games, I actually love VR and I have 3 different headsets in my collection. The reality is, if it's gaming hardware, I'll find a way to love it somehow and I'll definitely add it to my overall game room. But even though I don't review VR games or the hardware often whatsoever, I absolutely love it in concept and it is something that I get a kick out of playing around with. Forget to get involved though, to be a huge favor down below, hit like and subscribe and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, I got a Patreon link down below as well. And don't forget, Metal Gear Solid has the VR missions, so basically there already is a VR game ready to play, except it doesn't actually have VR support in it yet. But even with the first-person camera here in Metal Gear Solid, one of the 2 examples that VRified is actually going to show, this would absolutely be so much fun to run around the world of Metal Gear Solid in first person, and I think it would actually add a lot to the overall experience in certain ways, which I'll explain in just a moment. But what I really love is just how fun and creative people are being in 2026 when it comes to retro gaming and how you can actually play it. This is why retro gaming is making a comeback is one of my favorite things to say recently, but I really do believe it because you're getting so many new experiences out there that are just absolutely things people dreamt of a couple years ago. And again, with an overall VR implementation in PlayStation 1, especially in a game like Metal Gear Solid in the first-person view, well, imagine how fun it would be to actually be able to lean your head around that corner and see where the guards are and not depend on the mini-map, because the first-person view is useful, but it would be so much better in VR. Now moving over to VRified's video here, I left a link in the description below. Go over to his channel and give him a sub. Right now he's at 4.6 thousand subscribers. Go blow him up and make him go over 5,000 and leave comments saying Video Game Esoterica sent you. Because I am very much a believer in the rising tides float all boats. Everyone should be getting views. Definitely VRified deserves them. And it's one of those things. I love that someone's even working on this. This is definitely not an easy task to do whatsoever, because the PlayStation 1 is not designed or intended for VR in any way, shape, or form, and I don't even remember any rumors of PlayStation 1 having a VR headset in development, which I am actually surprised by because Atari Jaguar had a prototype, 3DO was working on one. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe somewhere in the background Sony played around with that idea. But again, it would be so fun to play through these games, even if you actually could play them first person or third person, because I feel like Metal Gear Solid would kind of look like looking into a diorama if you actually played around with them in VR. And imagine the ability to actually hold a controller in your hand, maybe even a motion control, and be able to aim. That might be a little bit more than the actual developer is planning here, but I'm just kind of thinking about how much fun something like this could be. And even though they only showcase Metal Gear Solid and Silent Hill, which we'll get into in just a moment, I would love to see something like Crash Bandicoot, Spyro the Dragon, Ape Escape, and all those fun 3D platformers in VR as well. Because if this works, I'm sure it can be a universal tool with some actual manual adjustments to get a ton of PlayStation 1 games working in virtual reality. Because obviously we have an incredible emulator in Duckstation, we have stuff like the Mr. FPGA core, and we obviously have real hardware, so why not have another way to play some of these absolute hits? And basically I just YOLO'd that, ran straight forward into trouble like I basically always do in Metal Gear Solid when I'm capturing footage, because it is a very slow-paced game and I always want to rush through it. And you'll see here again, seeing something like this in first person with the ability to actually be able to move around with the headset on and see around corners, see enemies, and kind of just feel like you were playing as Solid Snake. That would definitely be an overall vibe that I would love to get into, because there's so many different ways to play these favorite retro games. Why not have some of them available in VR as well? Leave me a comment down below and you tell me, is this something you would be interested in or not? Because I know not everyone out there actually enjoys VR. And as we jump into the water here and go into first person mode again, seeing that out of a headset would absolutely be epic in my opinion. It would be immersive and I'd absolutely love to play this game in first person in that VR headset. Now, another game that VRified is demoed as work in progress in VR is going to be the original Silent Hill, and this even more so than Metal Gear Solid absolutely excites me, but I love that two Konami showings and two of Konami's best games on the PlayStation 1 are two of the leading contenders for having VR support. And again, I love Silent Hill, and I would love to run through the world of this in first person in virtual reality. And I personally do enjoy modern VR horror games. I played through the entirety of Resident Evil 7 and 8 in VR and absolutely enjoy the ever-loving hell out of them. So long as there's not spiders, I can absolutely hang. But something like Farpoint on the original PSVR, the first time a spider burrowed into the ground and jumped at my face, that headset was ripped off about as fast as it possibly could, and I have never played that game since. But a lot of people like the idea of horror in VR, but just can't hang with modern graphics. So imagine being able to play something like Silent Hill in first person. It is old looking enough that you're really not going to believe the what you're seeing is real, but it still is horror and still gives you suspense. And I think this would be a great candidate to get people into horror VR gaming, just because it isn't going to be too intense, and obviously the models don't really look realistic. So taking a look at VRified's footage again, and one more time, go sub to them and get them over that 5,000 subscriber mark. I want to see it happen. Do it for me and for VRified. This would just be absolutely epic. Walking forward, being able to look down and see your body, be able to actually aim in VR and see all of the fun character designs. I want this experience because obviously we have the work in progress PC port based upon the Silent Hill decompilation project. We have stuff like Bloober Team working on a Silent Hill remake, and I kind of wish Bloober Team and Konami would put VR into stuff like that as well, because it just is a more immersive experience, and it is something that you really have to experience to believe. Leave me a comment down below and you tell me, do you have VR headsets? Do you play VR games? And if so, what's your favorite hardware and what are some of your favorite games? For me personally, it might not be the best hardware on the market, but the MetaQuest 3 is just the easiest thing to deal with, and because I have my router in the same room and it is quite powerful, I will do wireless from my PC and everything works amazingly well. So that would be great for something like this, actual PlayStation 1 VR emulation without any cords tethered to you. That really is the dream of VR, having nothing connecting you to the actual console or PC. Because don't get me wrong, I've loved PSVR too, but it is kind of a pain when you have that gigantic heavy cord, and I do think it's heavy even though it is smaller than PSVR 1, attached to your head and kind of tethering you to the real world. Because when you talk about immersion, stuff like cords definitely break it a little bit in my opinion. And taking a look at something like the PC port here right now, just for some extra footage, being able to live inside of the world, for lack of a better term, of something like Silent Hill just absolutely is a project I want to see come to fruition in 2026. Leave me a comment down below and you tell me if you could snap your fingers right now and make one PlayStation 1 game have an absolutely perfect VR experience, which one would it be? And honestly, I'm conflicted about this one. I have two different answers, one that makes perfect sense and one that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. For the perfect sense answer, I would love to see LSD Dream Emulator work in virtual reality, because that game is absolutely an insane vibe, and it all takes place in the first person, so it really is a great candidate for that. Now, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever, but I just love to see it. Mizurna Falls, that's just because Silent Hill always makes me think of that. It's basically Silent Hill meets Twin Peaks, and it's amazing and has an English translation, so if you never checked out Mizurna Falls, can't recommend it enough, and I'd love to live in that world as well in VR. But there's so many fun things going on in retro gaming right now. There's so many different ports, decomps, recomps, things like that. But seeing PlayStation 1 potentially get support for virtual reality is a ton of fun. And just think of it this way, it's not just games that already exist that could run in virtual reality, it's also a bunch of games that people would probably build from the ground up just around the concept of VR. Because that's the exciting thing about a development like this. Sure, people think about all of the amazing PlayStation 1 games that would be even more fun in VR or even different of an experience, but it also means that modern developers could go in, use that PlayStation 1 hardware aesthetic on real PlayStation 1 emulation, and then just have a VR headset connected and building the game around that. But no, this is not for original hardware. I'm sure in some crazy world it could be potentially possible to run a VR headset on real PS1 hardware, but I think you'd have to have an engineer who knew exactly everything about the hardware working for years just to get a result that probably wasn't really enjoyable for anybody. But honestly, this is exciting stuff. It definitely hypes me up because PlayStation 1 Emulation and Duckstation is so incredibly good. We basically can play every single PlayStation 1 game ever made with enhancements, but the one thing you can't really easily do is play them in VR. Now, don't think it's a one-click conversion process. Definitely takes a lot of actual human configuration, but the closest you can get to VR right now is playing the work-in-progress PC port where the camera seems to want to go into first person. but this is the type of stuff that I'm always willing to talk about on the channel. I love when people think outside of the box, or in this instance inside of the headset, and think to themselves, what could we do for games that are already well known, already famous, and already played to death? Well, let's just bring them all into VR and give people a brand new experience on console hardware and games that they know, love, and remember. That's the type of stuff that retro gaming needs more of, and that's why I want to talk about this one. So go subscribe to VRify, definitely tell them I sent you, and I'll see you guys next time. Hope you enjoyed the video. Bye-bye.